So I want to give you a framework for thinking about artistic fittingness, how an artwork can be well placed, and that is a part of its essential beauty, and its allure, how it's delightful, and give you some examples as you're thinking of your own work. But I'm just going to begin. I want to invite you to imagine the beauty of some well-placed works just in everyday life. So I don't know if it's true here in Mount Pleasant, Charleston area, but in Charlotte, pickleball is all the rage. And I was skeptical at first, I have to admit. I was like, is this a sport for well-seasoned folks who don't want, quite the everything of tennis? And I have to say, I became a convert. I love it. I love pickleball. And there's just something about being able to make that shot and that hits just in the right spot, right? Just at the right speed. And it feels so good. It's just so beautiful. It's like, yes, that is a well-placed shot. And I feel so good about having done that. I don't feel as good about when someone does that against me. But whether it's skill or finesse or just plain old luck, there's beauty in that well-placed shot. If that doesn't resonate at all, you're not a sporty kind of person, think of a meal that you're sitting down to. And if you've ever been at one of these meals where the food is carefully sourced, lovingly prepared, the table's set with this elegant simplicity, there's this hospitable and connective ambiance, and the conversation's intentional but relaxed, and everyone's just savoring and lingering with a sense of contentment. You know what I'm talking about? There's the beauty of a well-placed meal. Just fits. It all fits. And perhaps at this meal, you're engaged in an important conversation with the group, but everyone's struggling to find the right words to articulate kind of the crux of the matter. And so there's all this listening and dialogue, and then someone in the group says something that makes the person next to them say, "Wait, say that again?" And they repeat it, and this appreciative silence falls. I just made up a word, I think. Silence falls on the group because they have said what everyone else was trying to say, and it just fit. Fit the moment, fit the conversation. It's the beauty of a well-placed word. It's like Proverbs says, a man finds joy in giving a fitting reply. How beautiful is a timely word. Or a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver. It's going to get you thinking about that fittingness of a well-placed work. The pickleball shot, the communal meal, the timely word. And those are acts of creativity, right? We are all creative. Some are gifted as artists, but we're all creative. We're doing these creative acts all the time. And what makes them beautiful is not that they are merely pleasant or nice. Please hear me. Christians need to hear this over and over again. Beauty is not nice, okay? That's sentimentality. We need to get past it. The pickleball shot may occur after a long, grueling, sweaty volley with some choice words thrown in. I don't know. It's not necessarily nice, but it's well-placed. The communal meal may include a dish that challenges your taste buds, or maybe it contains some relational tension, but it still could be well-placed. The fitting word may be one of challenge or even rebuke and be well-placed. So what makes these works beautiful is not that they are nice, but that they are fitting. There's a fittingness of expression, a fittingness of setting and delivery, a situational, contextual fittingness, a fittingness to the materials, a fittingness of the effect. So the shots or the meal or the word were crafted specifically for this place at this time with these people, with these materials. And you can just sense when it's right and good and beautiful. So this dynamic of fittingness is at play in any act of creativity, and I'd contend is something that artists should be aiming for in creating their work, and then something that audiences should be looking for when receiving and appreciating works of art. And I am definitely not the first one to talk about this. A couple books to recommend. Speaking of books, this is good. We have Nicholas Walterstorff. Originally wrote this in the 1980s, his book Art in Action. And he claims that artists are workers in fittingness. And they're crafting works in a way that's fitting to their materials, fitting to ideas and modes of consciousness, and works that contain a fittingness of the individual parts to the whole, like we saw in Gina's work, as well as fittingness to different modes, like fittingness of color to sound to taste. So this cross-modal kind of fittingness. So, for example, he claims that there is a certain fittingness, I don't know whether you'll agree here on this, between lightness, smallness, ice cream, Mozart's music, and Matisse's paintings. Maybe. Just as there is a certain fittingness between heaviness, largeness, warm pea soup, Beethoven's music, and Rembrandt's paintings. So I guess what he's saying is the next time you're looking at Rembrandt, try doing it while listening to Beethoven and eating warm pea soup and see if it's a more fitting experience for you. But his point is an artist is a worker in fittingness. And so by creating art that displays fittingness within the work of art, as well as fittingness between the artwork and a whole range of meanings and associations, including the kind of world that the artist desires to portray, then you can create something beautiful in that sense. And he has further work as well on this, Art Rethought, the social practices of art. He fleshes out this idea that artists are workers in fittingness, and he includes the social and contextual purpose of the art. So an artwork is fitting if it effectively serves the purpose for which it was made, whether facilitating corporate worship, rallying a crowd at a sporting event, or helping citizens remember their national story. All art serves a purpose in ordinary life. It doesn't only just exist for disinterested contemplation. Walter Sturff calls that the grand meta-narrative of the art world, and he's trying to dismantle it. That art actually serves a purpose, even if it's just sitting in a museum. And so he's showing that the beauty of a well-placed work, it's complex, it's multidimensional, and it's contextual. So a piece of music that's fitting to as a World Cup anthem, for example. I love Wavin' Flag by Kanon. It's one of the best World Cup anthems ever written. That's not going to be fitting or well-placed for a Christian funeral, right? So music made for this purpose is not going to fit music made for this purpose. Or a dance that is fitting at the Charleston Ballet is probably not going to be a fitting dance for a wedding dance, for example, unless I guess they're two ballet dancers kind of doing that. So there's that fittingness to purpose. Then there's this contextual fittingness that applies to a similar kind of art in different places. So a wedding dance here in South Carolina may seem out of place for a wedding dance in South Africa, depending on the context. Worship music in an African-American congregation in urban Charlotte could be out of place in a white congregation in rural North Carolina. So both forms of dancing and worship music may be beautiful in their own right as standalone art forms, but the fullness of their beauty relates to the contextual fittingness. Are they out of place or are they in place? And this leads to tons of questions, I realize, like how do we judge between a well-placed work of art and an out-of-place work of art? And what are the different dimensions of that fittingness? What are standards for each one of them? How does the artist prepare for and execute the making of a beautiful, well-placed artwork? And that's actually where I want to start. Because I think that the process of preparation and the process of creation is absolutely essential, critical to whatever that end product is. And so I want to address how artists create a fitting, well-placed work. And the example I want to use, because this is the art form I know the best, is improvisational theater. So I did my PhD on theater and theology. And so I know it well, but also I think that we can see clearly how this applies to any other art form. So to the decorative arts or to music or to poetry. So I'm going to give you this example, but be thinking about, okay, how does this relate to my own form of artistry? So we're asking the question, how does the artist prepare for and execute the beauty of a well-placed work? So specifically, I want to be asking, how does an actor prepare for and deliver a well-placed performance? And part of this, of course, all the background stuff, the role of the playwright, who's tasked with creating a beautiful, well-placed script. But I just want to focus on the actor. How does the actor, the artist in this case, prepare for and execute a well-placed performance? So imagine this scene. Two actors are on a stage. They're there to perform Freud's Last Session, 2009 play by Mark St. Germain, which is this imagined conversation, wonderful play, by the way, between Sigmund Freud and C.S. Lewis shortly before Freud dies. The film version came out today, actually, on Netflix. I knew it was coming out, and I just looked in the hotel room this morning, and I'm like, oh, yes, can watch it tonight. It stars Anthony Hopkins as Freud and Matthew Good as Lewis, so going to be awesome. But so imagine, sorry, that screen's not working. Imagine it's closing night, and the director of the play has told both actors for this closing show, they can improvise an original scene that's not in the script, okay? Now, if you know anything about theater, that would be like super frightening to think about doing this, but also exhilarating. And so they accept the challenge. So how are they going to do it? How do you prepare for and execute well-placed creativity, a well-placed scene like that? Prepare and create is the key phrase. Because for the actor, like any artist, that adequate preparation is absolutely critical for the fitting performance, for making a well-placed work. And for the actor, that process of preparation, it's very holistic. It's a complex process that involves a readiness to do and say whatever is fitting in the moment. A readiness to do and say whatever is fitting in the moment. So the essence of theatrical preparation is developing this multi-dimensional receptivity and readiness to create a fitting, well-placed work. And I have a word for that. It's a big word. I want you to remember because it's a fun word. Disponibility. If you want to read more about this, it's in my book called Living Theodrama. But disponibility is from the French disponibilité. So if you're in a French-speaking country, and you're driving around and you see an apartment for rent, it'll say disponible, available, right? So disponibility is availability, but more broadly, not just available for rent, but like available as in ready. It's ready for whatever use you need it for. So it means openness, readiness, receptivity. It sums up in a single word the preparation, the receptivity, and the state of readiness that actors, and I would say all artists, really aspire to. So disponibility is a multi-dimensional receptivity and readiness to create a fitting, well-placed work. And that's toward all sorts of different things, right? For the actor, it's disponibility to the script or the story, to fellow actors, to the audience, the physical set in the theater space, the director's prompts, performance traditions and expectations, as well as cultural context. I mean, there is a lot to be receptive to. So think about the two actors in Freud's Last Session. If they're going to have the readiness to improvise a beautiful, well-placed scene, they're going to need to develop this disponibility to the script, to each other's characters, to the director's expectations and guidance, to the physical space, to the prospective audience, to the rules of improvisational acting, to their own personalities and limits, and to the cultural context outside the theater, all of which will then enable them to perform, to improvise this well-placed scene. So disponibility, I would argue, is as much a frame of mind, an attitude, as it is a set of concrete skills that enables you to be receptive, attentive, and ready to act in fitting, well-placed ways. And my contention is that this disponibility is essential for any artist. seeking to create a well-placed work. And because you're going to create a work, right, that's fitting and well-placed in relation to materials, the audience, cultural context and moment, physical location, as well as just the beliefs, desires, and goals of the artist, and many other elements that may be at play. But it's the multi-dimensional disponibility, readiness, receptivity that's going to enable and will permeate the beauty of a well-placed work. So whether we're speaking of an actor or a photographer, musician, painter, dancer, writer, filmmaker, any kind of artist, I think that developing disponibility is just as important and often just as difficult as the actual creation of the work. And no doubt there's a place for inspiration and spontaneity in the process, but the improvisation involved in all artistic and creative work is often misunderstood as a product of originality, pure inspiration, spur-of-the-moment decisions. Sometimes, yes, but in reality, the best and often the most important and beautiful artistry flows from deep preparation, training, and this disponibility that's constituted by holistic receptivity and a long obedience in the same direction as an artist. Because as artists who are operating out of a Christian commitment, you got to fold in other elements of disponibility. There is attentiveness to the will of the Father. There's a commitment to develop the mind of Christ. There's a readiness to listen for and respond to the Spirit as we operate out of our new selves in union with God. So a creative work that is fitting materially, contextually, relationally, physically, personally, and so on, but fails to be receptive to the revelation of God, will fall short of being a well-placed work in the most ultimate sense. So you've got all of this preparation. You have this disponibility that you are developing, and now it's time to create. And not that the process of developing disponibility is ever over, but out of whatever disponibility the artist has cultivated, now it's time to write, to paint, to compose, to build, to choreograph, design, to perform, in hope that what emerges will fit, will be the beauty of this well-placed work. And in doing so, artists need to be attentive to the same dimensions of fittingness that are at play in disponibility. So there should be attunement to material fittingness, contextual fittingness, relational fittingness, personal fittingness, historical and traditional fittingness, and for the Christian, attunement to theological and biblical, spiritual, ecclesial dimensions of fittingness. And inevitably, judgments regarding what's fitting, what's a well-placed work, and what's an unfitting, out-of-place work will be contested. This is an ongoing conversation. But from a Christian perspective, I think a robust pneumatology or a robust view of the Spirit's work will keep us humble and attentive and expectant regarding how the Spirit is guiding you and me and other artists to bring well-placed works into the world. And within a theological perspective that acknowledges everything good and beautiful and true is a gift from God, that all things are sustained and find their vitality by the abundant grace of God, then actually we can be free to create without the unhealthy pressures of independence, self-sufficiency, and originality. So I think Christians have the best setup for being most joyfully creative because we serve a free, gracious God. The creative action of God is our liberating constraint. So let me get to some examples just to retrace our steps real quick. We're created in God's image to make well-placed works, whether artistically or otherwise. All of us have experiences of well-placed works in our life. It's what generates delight, luster, wisdom, satisfaction. And as image bearers of the God who created the original, most well-placed work ever, the world that we live in, we're called to be makers of little well-placed worlds, which are just miniature imitations of what God is up to. Second, the artist is in particular a worker in fittingness, tasked with making art that's well-placed in relation to all these different things. Purpose, materials, medium, context, tradition, location, ideas, beliefs, audience. And beauty is one of the features of a well-placed fitting work. Sorry, I'm behind. Here we go. Forgot the gaps in between the lines. Artistic fittingness flows from multidimensional disponibility, this receptivity and readiness to create a well-placed work. And within a Christian imaginary, both disponibility and fittingness are oriented toward the presence and action of the triune God. The will and love of God the Father, the example and grace of God the Son, the leading and empowerment of the Spirit. I think given our natural, remember we talked about our natural postures, self-preoccupation, self-service. Christians believe that any genuine disponibility, any fittingness are miracles of grace, which keep us humble, repentant, and dependent, while also courageous, joyful, and free, since we're free to fail while forever being loved. It's the mystery of the gospel. So that's our foundation. And I will look at, given the time, probably 2 examples. I have like 12. 2 examples, and I'd love to have some more dialogue on this framework. And here's some of your examples. The first example, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I know this artist pretty well. My wife, Stephanie. It's a shameless plug, Stephanie Ann Fiber Art. She's a wonderful creative who has done all sorts of different fiber art. This one is called Announcing Your Place in the Family of Things. And in order for you to appreciate this as a well-placed work, it's important to hear the artist's own words. So since my wife is at the beach with our kids, I'm just going to read it to you. She says, "Announcing your place in the family of things is a weaving that tells my hidden story of cultural not belonging. Growing up in West Africa, I was formed by ways of being that were worlds away from those of my American passport culture. And when I was a teenager and my family moved to an American suburb, this transition initiated an invisible crack in my sense of self, home, and belonging that have taken years for me to disentangle. My home country and culture were a bewilderment, and I felt out of place, even while I looked and sounded like everyone around me. This weaving is a reflection on the communal human experience of being thrown in the world. It also serves as a tribute to those who have fled because home is no longer safe. A plea for humans to practice radical welcome and homemaking together, forging awkward, as in the other way around, upside down, ways of belonging to each other. Made with fabric from 7 different cultures that have served as a sort of home to me, this weaving is a love song to the complex notion of home, the unexpected places where it is found, and an homage to the threads of story that form the wild tapestry of life." Think about the disponibility at work here, the receptivity that preceded the creation of the work. So you have the personal disponibility, in which case this was Stephanie's receptivity to her own story. The readiness to grapple with its fullness, the desolations and the consolations, the cultural unbelongings and the belongings. There's a contextual and cultural disponibility in that Stephanie's aware of the different dynamics of all the places and cultures where she's lived. There's certainly a disponibility to materials and medium, more of a close-up here. A readiness to work with different fibers. There's not just fiber from 7 different cultures, but 7 different kinds of materials she's working with. A knowledge of how the hoops work, right, and their capacity to be bent and shaped. There's an ethical and missional disponibility in that Stephanie was aware that we live in a time of mass displacement and mobility, a time when the notion of home is contested and distorted, and yet there's still that longing in our hearts for home. That the essence of the church's mission is to create home and be a family with an open door to those who are displaced and searching. And then I think underneath and within all of that is Stephanie's theological and biblical disponibility, and aware of the biblical story and God's mission is to create a new family and a new home for all of creation, despite all that has been and is being unraveled. So you just think about what preceded what you see, right? That's the disponibility, all of its dimensions. And out of that, and within it, of course, Stephanie creates what I think, maybe I'm being biased, I think is as a well-placed, beautiful work. And she describes the process of creating, I know you artists will resonate with this, as alternating between states of creative flow and contemplation. So the flow state is improvisational and it's active, but its foundation, I think, is that disponibility that precedes and permeates the work. But then in between flow states, Stephanie steps back from the work and she evaluates its progress in lieu of intention and purpose. She makes adjustments. She pulls threads out, right, and redoes things, takes breaks, and then plunges back into that process of creating something fitting and well-placed. In the work itself, I keep looking at the blank screen. In the work itself, you think back to Walter Storff's categories, there's well-placed color and proportion, but also a fittingness of fabric and yarn color to its country of origin and her experiences of those places. There's the curvature of the hoop. So this is an interesting little fact. Most weaving hoops are supposed to be flat. This one warped when she prepared it, and she left it that way. Because she sensed that there's something fitting to her curved, circuitous, sometimes warped journey through America, Belgium, Togo, Cameroon, Mexico, Scotland, and now back to the U.S. She's like, okay, yeah, this fits. This fits. It's not supposed to be on the wall, but it's kind of, coming at you. And then there's a fittingness in titling the piece. So what Stephanie does with all of her weavings is she grabs a line from a poem to title her pieces. And so there's that going on too. The line, announcing your place in the family things, is a closing line in a poem by Mary Oliver entitled Wild Geese. And this poem is encouraging the reader, despite failure and despair, that the world's beauty, wildness, and uncontrollability is a gift. Whatever twists and turns your life takes, Oliver writes, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like a wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. And I love this because I think titling her piece in this way, it's almost like Stephanie's relativizing her experience a little, given the grandeur of God, given the whole community of creation, and recognizing that we have so much to learn from God and the community of creation. We have something to learn from wild geese, especially, a species like this that experiences long, perhaps even lonely migrations. So that's one example. You have the disponibility that precedes and permeates the work, and then the actual fittingness of the work itself. A little bit of weaving and poetry. I want to go to a musical example. Raise your hand if you're familiar with Porter's Gate. Okay, some of you. So they founded, I think, 7 years ago or so. It's a collective of 50-plus songwriters, musicians, scholars, pastors, from a variety of Christian worship traditions and backgrounds. They're making music for churches. And this is the 6th album of theirs. It's made in partnership with the Climate Vigil movement, and it's themed around environmental justice and creation care. I'm going to play the song for you, see if you can get a sense for if it's a fitting or well-placed work. But here's some thoughts that I have on the disponibility that preceded the creation. So there's first just a disponibility to what kind of culture do we live in, right? What's the age in which we live? It's an age of species extinction, deforestation, natural disasters, lots of ecological catastrophes. So we live in an age in which all creatures of our God and King, which is what the tune is based on, are not only creatures that sing Alleluia, but also creatures that lament. So there's this disponibility of we're singing in an age of crisis. The second aspect of disponibility is to the tradition of hymnody that gave us all creatures of our God and King, which is a wonderful hymn. It's a paraphrase of St. Francis of Assisi's Canticle of the Sun by the English clergyman William Henry Draper in 1901. And unlike many songs of its time, all creatures of our God and King is entirely optimistic. And it's a song of thanksgiving, which is wonderful, right? But it's not always the only thing we need to be singing in terms of creation today. But they're riffing off of the tradition of this hymn. The third aspect of disponibility is to the purpose of hymnody, which, yes, can be used for personal worship, but hymns are written for corporate worship, right? And so they should be singable, and they should be memorable, which can involve a predictable meter, a simple yet elegant melody, rhyme, sometimes setting it to a familiar tune. So this one, all creatures of our God and King. So what fittingness sounds like then is a response to the disponibility that preceded it. If you're not familiar with the original hymn, here's just the first verse. It's all creatures of our God and King. It's the hymn. Beautiful. And what you're going to hear instead, in contrast, just to give you a little preview, instead of lift up your voice and with us sing, lift up your voices, let them ring, fill the earth with lamentation. Cry out the abuses of our power, tell what we lose with every hour. To our greed and depredation, Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. So they're acknowledging, of course, there's a time for hymns of thanksgiving. But we also, in the age in which we live, need to have songs of lament. And so they are creating from this original tune a song of lament. So I'd love to play it for you. Be thinking about what other dimensions of fittingness you notice and hear in the song, and would love to hear your thoughts. there are the remaining lyrics for you. But I'd love to hear from you. What your reactions were to the song would be good, but more specifically, how might you say that this is a well-placed work? What elements of fittingness does this song have to it? Any thoughts? Go ahead.
First of all, profoundly touching and beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think discernibility is all over the place in this.
For sure.
One of them that's really obvious is just the actual production of it, the sounds of it, the instruments it fits very much into the genre of that kind of alt folk thing that's been happening for a number of years.
Yes.
Really launched by Sufjan Stevens and many others, but
Yep.
it fits right in that, especially given the audience that follows that kind of music and takes it in. So it really speaks to them, but I think it's also got other beautiful elements of the classical bits, etc. The strings and the arrangement is amazing, and that'll draw others in as well that wouldn't necessarily jump into the other genres. So,
Does, yeah, absolutely. Any other music nerds want to point out any other musical elements of fittingness in the song? I don't know if your ears were tuned to this, but this is written in a minor key. So all creatures of our God and King, I don't know what key it is, but it's major. It's a major key. So they've taken what is a major key hymn, which often are settings for thanksgiving and praise, fittingly so. It sounds joyful, whereas this minor key is fitting to the lament that it is. Okay, so that's one very practical aspect of fittingness.
Well, as a music nerd, you get the sparseness.
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, in the minor, it's sparse. And it just feels like this heart cry from the earth, pleading to God.
Mm-hmm.
Asking for forgiveness of what we've done here. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just the way it was done,
Yeah.
brings you into this sense of mourning and
Yep.
asking for forgiveness.
Yeah. The musical presentation fits the emotion, fits the thoughts. And this is something that I would, on a weekly basis, be discussing with my music team at the church I led, because not all of our songs are set up that way for us. And so, I don't want to be singing, "Come ye sinners, poor and weary." No, it's a confession, right? It's a lament. So where's the musical fittingness, the aesthetic fittingness in style to the content? And we get that with this, yeah. Was there a question over here? I thought I saw a hand or thought.
It wasn't necessarily a musical observation, but the juxtaposition of us as creatures, but creatures who are called to have a priestly role above other creatures, and then kind of comparing and contrasting that with the theme of the lament as all the ways that we fail to exercise our priestly calling.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. And how it emphasizes the theme that we get in the Psalms and like Romans 8, that we join in with and are leaders of the voice of all of creation, both in its praise and its lament. So we get to voice creation's praise and we get to voice creation's lament in that way. Yeah, so good. Another aspect.
Well, I hate to even say this, but I also thought, this also really walks the line of political correctness too, with the topic in the word.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Yeah, for sure.
what's okay and not okay, especially in corporate worship.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not going to answer that question. That's where there has to be a contextual fittingness of, would this be a stumbling block in your context? Would it be fitting? Or to what extent in your context does the community need to be stretched? And when's the right time for that? Or place? Maybe you don't introduce this on a Sunday morning. Maybe there's another opportunity. You know, I did my most risky artistic things on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday because I had just a little bit more. It wasn't our typical liturgy, our Sunday liturgy that is, for good reason, very sacred. You know.
But of course, if the rocks can cry out, right?
Yeah.
The stars can sing, and if this is nature speaking, you have to be able. You could easily say, well, how can you argue with nature singing this?
Yeah. Are we actually listening
Yeah.
to what creation is saying? Yeah. Yeah, up here too.
Yeah, I just had a couple things that stood out for me was, and I know nothing about music, so I'll figure that one. But I really appreciated where it started off with just the female singing, and then the man came in.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of felt to me like it was giving the message that now it was incorporating everybody.
Mm.
So it wasn't just, it just felt so much more inclusive, like the whole world was now singing this.
Mm.
And then also the lyrics itself, like that lyric there about choked with the fumes of poison gas.
Yeah. Tough to hear in a.
Hark back to what you were talking about. Where's the oxygen? That was my.
Yes. Yeah.
Where's the oxygen?
Wow. That's powerful. Yes, please.
What I was going to say, and it kind of fits in with what Vicki brought up, regardless of that, in a Christian context, it just bypasses everything and goes straight to your heart or spirit.
Mm.
I mean, I found myself very moved.
Very moved, I know.
And I think that's the God breathing
Mm.
through it.
Mm. Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Maybe the voice of dissent.
Hey, it's welcome.
Be kind of triggering.
Mm.
It felt so political to me.
Mm.
And so you asked about the fit.
Yep.
And I just, what is this? What is this? What is this? What was the context that this is supposed to be used for?
So these songs are written for a variety of different worship settings, personally and communally. So and the whole album is framed as a collection of laments. There are a couple hymns of praise in there, but this would be a, how long, O Lord, will this devastation continue kind of song.
For worshipers, for is it
For believers.
for believers?
Correct. Yep. And totally, appreciate the different responses, and which goes back to the notion of where and when and how would this be fitting. And I love that that the song invites that conversation, or foregrounds it necessarily.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Last one maybe yeah.
I felt that it crosses a lot of boundaries,
Hmm.
yet is very inclusive across the boundaries
Hmm.
because of what's being portrayed throughout all of the lyrics, and in each so-called stanza, you've got something that you can really focus on. Cry out abuses of our power.
Yeah.
Given the power over the earth. The next one down, tell us of our degradation. Again, we're also at the cause of it.
Mm-hmm. We're involved in the story. Mm-hmm.
Teach us to see your wonders now. The wonders are still here.
Mm. Mm.
And then in the last, weep with the fear of worse to come.
Mm.
We can continue to be worse than we are today.
Mm.
But at the finish of each, we call back to the Lord.
Yes.
Every one of them. So even for a non-believer, they hear the Lord being professed as over it all.
Mm.
So I think it encompasses so many of any of us who do believe and those who don't. But there's something being that you can't refute what's being said.
Mm.
We're doing this.
I appreciate all of your reactions, all your thoughts. You can see how getting at the specifics of what makes up a well-placed work can be tricky, and it's always contextual. And so I think it's very important in conversations like this to hear from lots of different people and how they're hearing and experiencing something. But also it brings us back to the topic of beauty. So let me just close with this, just a couple encouragements. I don't have more slides for this. That was going to be my next example. Read Abigail Carroll's poetry. It will be my encouragement there. She's amazing. But just in terms of the topic of beauty, which I think is something that emerges when something is fitting and well-placed, that means, this is where it gets very challenging, it means something as horrific as crucifixion can be beautiful in a sense that's connected with how resurrection can also be beautiful. Okay? Is death a good thing? No. Was the crucifixion of Jesus a well-placed work? The most well-placed work in some way, at the fullness of time, right? So, and if Jesus, God's revelation in Christ is our standard for beauty, then we need to push ourselves to see how beauty goes belonging to wounds, just as it goes belonging to empty tombs. So it challenges that sentimentality that I mentioned earlier. When we reduce beauty to something nice or just emotionally pleasing, I think we cut off beauty from truth and goodness and the power of beauty to move us, transform us, and give us hope. That's why I think there can be beauty in a song like this. The other thing that needs to be said is that the beauty of a well-placed work cannot ultimately be controlled or predicted. Sorry, it's just the way it is. Developing disponibility is critical, I think, to creating beautiful, well-placed works, but no level of disponibility can ever guarantee the making of a beautiful, well-placed work. I can no more control, predict, or guarantee making a beautiful poem than I can control, predict, or guarantee making a beautiful marriage. It's a gift of grace to do these things. And it's ultimately a work of God. Yes, there are time-tested methods of training. Yes, there are vast traditions of wisdom to consult. And there are habits of mind and heart and hands that get us going in the right direction. That's what this whole talk has been about in some ways, those habits of disponibility. But at the end of the day, beauty is an uncontrollable gift because God is uncontrollable and unmasterable. So in the process of making beautiful, well-placed works, we are always dependent, whether we realize it or not, on the God who made the beautiful world to begin with, who created us in his image as makers, who formed us and placed us in the world with particular personalities and gifts and passions, and who sustains our lives, who, as Gerard Manley Hopkins says in his poem, who plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely, how does it go? Lovely in limbs and lovely through the features of men's faces. Lovely to, I don't know, something like that. I butchered the poem, I'm sorry. Christ plays in 10,000 places through the beauty, through our beauty is the point. Through the beauty of you and I and the beauty of what we make. That God in Christ by the Spirit is playing in and through our desires and our attempts to make beautiful, fitting, well-placed works. So we can't control the process, but we can submit to it, enjoy it, and let beautiful, well-placed works emerge as our songs of praise. That's my encouragement to you. I hope you're encouraged. I also hope you see that it's a complex thing, and so habits of gratitude and dependence and humility are really, really important in this work. So we're probably out of time, I would imagine. So I guess I'll be done.